40,000 years before the first octagon, there was already a more brutal arena, the frozen wilderness, where only the lethal survived. On that night, two apex predators would face off. Silence. Just the whisper of the wind across the endless steppe. Ice crystals danced in the white void. The world breathed in slow motion. Whoosh! The blizzard awakened. The Siberian wind cut like invisible blades, 40 degrees below zero. Every breath was frigid fire in the lungs. On the white horizon, a silhouette advanced against the storm. Jongar, the Bone Breaker, the greatest Cro-Magnon hunter of the deep valleys. His muscles flexed under his tanned skin, golden eyes that calculated. In his hands, the soul-piercer spear, forged from a cave bear's fang. His tribe had been hungry for 7 moons. The children cried. The stores were empty. The elders whispered about the Mountain Breaker, a colossal mammoth that roamed alone in the forbidden lands. O Gladiador Primitivo Jongar didn't hunt in groups. A lone wolf that survives is legendary, he'd say. He developed deadly techniques. The dying bear's embrace broke long bones. The descending lightning strike shattered skulls. The serpent's stranglehold cut off air and blood simultaneously. A cruel difference. Modern John Jones had doctors and rules. Jongar only had one option: win or die. A Kakada Kamsa crack. A branch snapped behind him. Jongar spun around. Giant wolves. 3 of them. Hungry eyes in the blizzard. He let out a low growl, a perfect imitation of a cave bear. The wolves retreated. First victory. He resumed the trail. Enormous tracks in the snow. 6-foot footprints. The Mountain Breaker had passed this way. Rumble. The ground trembled. It wasn't an earthquake. It was him. O Gigante das Neves Mammothus Primigenius. 15 feet tall, 6 tons of fury. But this one transcended all measures. 40 years old. A patriarch who had survived avalanches, climate shifts, and attacks from packs. Tromp, tromp, tromp. The sound echoed in the storm. Jongar saw the curved tusks first, 12 feet of sharp death, then the muscular mass covered in thick fur. The mammoth stopped, scented the air. It knew it was being hunted. It turned its massive head. Small, intelligent eyes scanned the landscape. This animal thought, planned, adapted. Jongar emitted low sounds, a mix of female mating calls and rival screams. The air carried the guttural echo through the snow. A deep vibration resonated in his bones. The Mountain Breaker's ears twitched, confused. The wind shifted direction like a dragon's breath. It carried the human scent, sweat mixed with cured leather. The mammoth knew this odor. Predator. It struck its tusks on the ground, a sound like a blacksmith's hammer on ancient bronze. Challenge accepted. Ice shattered under the weight, a boom like giant glass breaking. Crystals flew like sharp shrapnel. Jongar circled. Each step crunched in the packed snow like old wood groaning. The giant followed him, turning slowly. A deadly dance on the ice. Flash. Crying children. Protruding ribs. Eyes empty with hunger. For the tribe. Jongar exploded from behind a rock. The spear pierced the air. A sound like giant silk tearing. The flint tip dug into the mammoth's rear thigh. The roar that followed was the collapse of a stone wall, making the ground tremble like an earthquake. Sharp ice whipped his face like razors. Warm blood ran from cuts on his cheek. The mammoth spun with surprising speed. Tusks sliced through the air where Jongar had been. The wind from the charge whistled like a storm. But the hunter had already rolled. He had already disappeared. The physical cost. His left shoulder ached from the impact with the hard snow. Leg muscles trembled from the effort. The cold penetrated his leather clothes, biting into his flesh. Warm blood ran onto the white snow. Their metallic smell mixed with the frigid air. The first wound. Drip, drip, drip. The Mountain Breaker limped slightly. Jongar noticed. The left rear leg favored. A weakness identified. The crash of a shattered tree echoed like ancient thunder. The mammoth had charged at shadows. Jongar attacked from the flanks. A blade scraped against bone. Second wound. Third. The cold was winning. Numb fingers barely held the spear. Labored breaths created clouds of vapor that froze instantly. A deep cut on his forehead bled blood that turned to ice before it hit the ground. The giant was learning. It stopped pursuing. Stood still. Waited. A psychological play. Jongar hesitated. Muscle fatigue burned in his legs. Had the mammoth won? Its trunk whipped through the air, a sound like a giant leather whip. It narrowly missed the hunter. Then the unthinkable happened. The mountain breaker raised its trunk, scooped up a massive amount of snow, and hurled it like a projectile. Jongar dodged by mere millimeters. His ribs ached from the abrupt movement. Use of tools. The animal was thinking. Immediately afterward, it stomped the ground strategically, a sound like hammers hitting an anvil, creating cracks in the ice where Jongar needed to step. A planned trap. Hours of combat. Jongar was destroyed, muscles in agony, cuts all over his body. Hypothermia advanced through his limbs. His toes were already without feeling. Flash. Undernourished babies sleeping, skin clinging to bones. He couldn't fail. The mammoth bled but remained standing. Sticks and stones were scattered around, the debris of the battle. A change in strategy. Jongar grabbed pointed branches, embedding them in the ground at lethal angles. An improvised trap. Painful breaths tore at his frozen lungs. Then he screamed. A perfect imitation of a baby mammoth in distress. The mountain breaker charged, blinded by parental fury. Sounds like branches snapping in a series, paws perforated by the sticks. The animal stumbled. Final opportunity. Jongar used the terrain. He leaped from a rocky elevation, taking advantage of gravity. The ice fragmented under the wounded giant's feet, a boom like a cathedral collapsing. A decisive moment. In midair, Jongar abandoned the spear. He implemented the dying bear's embrace, long arms wrapped around the massive neck, applying exact torque to the jugular artery. The air hissed with the cutting cold. The smell of blood and wet fur filled his nostrils. A moment of silence. Precise pressure cut off circulation, a visceral sound of cartilage compressing. The giant stopped, looked at Jongar. Mutual recognition between warriors. A sound like an ancient tree falling. The colossus collapsed. Thud. 6 tons came down. A crater in the frozen earth. A lysan eternal. Jongar touched the flank of the dead animal. The fur was still warm under his icy palm. His hands trembled, not from the cold but from pure adrenaline. Thank you, giant brother. Warm vapor escaped from the mammoth's nostrils. Its last breaths dissolved into the Arctic air like departing souls. Final flash. The faces of the tribe. Renewed hope. Children who would live. Deep understanding. Every victory requires sacrifice. Every predator becomes prey. The line between conqueror and conquered is thin. The sweet smell of victory mixed with the iron of spilled blood. Jongar's body screamed for rest. Muscles in tatters, cuts freezing on his skin, but his spirit burned with immortal flames. 40,000 years later, another Jon would dominate octagons with the same combination. Strategy, adaptation, instinct. Unaltered essence. Refined technique meets primitive savagery. Jongar began the journey back, carrying meat for the tribe. His tracks would be covered by the snow, but the legend remained. The ordeal was complete. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in spite of terror. The Ice Age ended. The mammoths went extinct. Jongar turned to dust, but the spirit remained, pulsing in the heart of every warrior who chooses to fight instead of flee. This is the lesson engraved in the ice of memory. We are descendants of Jongar, and in each of us beats the heart of a mammoth hunter.